You know that exact sound. You are lying in bed, right on the edge of a really deep, restful sleep, and suddenly you hear it.
Oh, yeah, that high-pitched whine.
Right, that erratic, whiny, buzzing sound right next to your ear. It is just the universal calling card of a mosquito in the room.
It is objectively one of the most annoying, anxiety-inducing sounds on the planet.
Totally. Mostly because you know exactly what comes next.
Yeah.
And, I mean, for decades, if you wanted to guarantee that that sound didn't end with an intensely itchy welt, or, depending on where you live, a serious life-threatening illness.
You reached for a dew air.
Exactly. You reached for the undisputed heavyweight champion of bug repellents. DEET has essentially been this heavy-duty, highly expensive bouncer at the VIP club of your skin. Just standing at the velvet rope telling mosquitoes, you're not on the list, back off.
Right.
But today, we are looking at a stack of sources that reveal a real challenger to the throne. A completely natural, widely available challenger that is apparently just as effective as DEET.
And the wildest part of these sources is what the challenger actually is.
Yeah, it's catnip, the exact same common herb that makes your feline friends just roll around on the living room rug in absolute euphoria.
I mean, it sounds exactly like an internet myth, right?
It really does.
Sound like one of those dubious natural remedies you see scrolling through a social media feed that promises you the world, but ultimately just leaves you standing in the woods covered in bug bites.
Yeah, exactly.
But the sources we have today are entirely grounded in rigorous, peer-reviewed science. We're looking at clinical trials presented at the Society for Experimental Biology conference in Florence, and we're digging into this really comprehensive research conducted by entomology teams from Cardiff University in Wales and Maker University in Uganda.
So this isn't a myth.
No, not at all. This is a scientifically validated intervention that is currently being deployed to actually save lives.
And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to explore how a common garden weed is being utilized right now to combat deadly mosquito-borne diseases in rural parts of Uganda. We're going to get into the actual biology of how it breaks a mosquito sensory system, and then we're going to bring it right back to your own kitchen, because we have the actual scientific ratios you need to make this stuff yourself.
Which is pretty incredible.
It is. But before we get to brewing backyard repellents, I need a reality check. Is a lotion made of catnip really throwing punches in the exact same weight class as an industrial chemical like DEET? I mean, DEET melts certain plastics. Is a plant extract really doing the same job?
It is genuinely in the exact same weight class, which is what shocked so many researchers.
Sure.
Yeah. To understand why it works so well, we really have to zoom in on a specific chemical compound found inside the essential oil of the catnip plant.
Okay, the botanical name is Nepetalactone,
Right. And the compound doing the heavy lifting here is called nepetalactone. Structurally, it's an iridoid monoterpene, which...
Wait, pause. An iridoid mono what?
An iridoid monoterpene. Basically, think of it as a specific class of organic compounds that plants evolved over millions of years specifically as a chemical defense mechanism against herbivores and insects.
Got it. So to a house cat, it mimics a feline pheromone, which is why they go crazy for it.
Exactly. But to a mosquito, nepetalactone is an absolute nightmare.
Okay, usually when we talk about bug spray, the general understanding is that we are masking our scent. Like we emit carbon dioxide and lactic acid, and the spray just acts like an invisibility cloak so they can't smell us.
Yeah, that's the standard idea. And DEET works largely by confusing or disrupting the insect's olfactory sensors to prevent them from landing. They just sort of lose the target.
Right.
But nepetalactone works through an entirely different biological pathway. According to the research highlighting the underlying mechanisms, it activates something called the TRPA1 receptor in insects.
And what does the TRPA1 receptor do?
It is an irritant receptor. It's essentially the alarm bell for the nervous system.
No.
When a mosquito detects nepetalactone in the air around your skin, it triggers a profoundly aversive physical reaction.
Like actual pain.
It causes actual physical discomfort. It is incredibly unpleasant for them. But the beautiful thing about this specific mechanism is that the human version of the TRPA1 receptor does not react to nepetalactone at all.
So it's not an invisibility cloak. It's more like spraying an invisible biological tear gas that only mosquitoes have the anatomy to detect.
Yes.
We just smell a slightly minty, pleasant herbal scent, and the mosquito feels like it just flew headfirst into a wall of pepper spray.
That is a highly accurate, very literal way to visualize what is happening on a microscopic level. And the researchers proved this pepper spray effect using some very elegant laboratory setups before they ever brought it out into the field.
Oh, right, the olfactometer thing.
Yeah, to measure exactly how aversive it was, they used a Y-tube olfactometer.
I am picturing a giant glass maze for bugs, but how does that actually work? Like, how do you force a mosquito to take a standardized sniff test?
It's remarkably simple in its design, really. It's a large Y-shaped glass tube. You put a small fan at the base of the Y to create a gentle, steady airflow moving up through the two branches.
Okay, makes sense.
Then you introduce hungry female Aedes aegypti mosquitoes into the base. Now, Aedes aegypti are the specific species that transmit dengue and yellow fever.
The really dangerous ones.
Right. At the end of one branch of the Y-tube, you place a human hand. At the end of the other branch, you place a human hand treated with the repellent. The mosquitoes fly up the tube, following the airflow, and they have to make a choice about which branch to go down.
It's like the ultimate biological blind taste test.
Exactly. When the researchers used a plain human hand in one branch and just an empty tube in the other, roughly 57% of the mosquitoes flew straight toward the human hand. They wanted the meal.
Sure.
When they put a DEET-treated hand in one of the branches, virtually 0 mosquitoes went down that path.
Which is what you'd expect from DT.
Right. But here is the critical part. When they tested the catnip essential oil, they didn't just use one concentration. They tested it all the way from 100% pure oil down to highly diluted mixtures.
Okay.
And they found that even at a mere 2% concentration of catnip oil, it effectively repelled over 70% of the mosquitoes from choosing that path.
Wait, just a 2% dilution blocks 70% of them?
Yeah.
But hold on. If 2% is doing that much heavy lifting, why wouldn't I just slather myself in 100% pure catnip oil? I mean, I'm going camping in the deep woods. I want to be entirely invincible. Give me the maximum dose of the invisible tear gas.
It is a totally logical leap, but it really comes down to human biology and the law of diminishing returns.
How so?
What's fascinating about the TRPA1 activation is that the studies showed increasing the concentration above a certain point didn't actually increase the immediate repellency.
Oh.
Yeah, the mosquitoes were already fully repelled by a 6% concentration of the tear gas. Making the air more toxic to them doesn't make them run away any faster if they're already refusing to land, you know?
That makes sense.
Furthermore, we have to consider the human wearing it. While catnip oil is generally very safe, applying any essential oil at 100% pure concentration directly onto human skin is a recipe for severe contact dermatitis and irritation.
Oh, yeah, you probably burn yourself.
Right. And frankly, the smell, while pleasant in small doses, would be overwhelmingly intense. The researchers were looking for a very specific sweet spot, maximum mosquito repellency, minimum cost of materials, and completely safe and pleasant for the user.
And a 6% concentration hit that mark perfectly.
It did.
So we know the 6% concentration works in a sanitized glass tube in a laboratory in Wales. But who actually needs a DT alternative the most? Because this research clearly wasn't funded just to give hikers in North America a slightly more pleasant-smelling bug spray.
Not at all. The stakes here are quite literally life and death. I mean, if we look at the global burden of malaria, the numbers are staggering.
I remember seeing the projections for next year.
Yeah, in the year 2025 alone, there are an estimated 282 million malaria infections globally. In 2024, the disease killed 610,000 people.
Unbelievable.
And the vast, devastating majority of those deaths are young children living in African countries.
610,000 deaths. It's just hard to even wrap your head around a number that massive.
It is, and what makes the situation so precarious right now is the rising threat of biological resistance. We are fighting an arms race against these insects.
They're adapting.
Exactly. The mosquitoes, specifically the Anopheles species, which is the primary vector that transmits malaria, they're rapidly becoming resistant to the standard insecticides used on bed nets and indoor sprays.
Wow.
On top of that, the malaria parasites themselves are developing resistance to the frontline pharmaceutical drugs we use to treat the disease once someone is actually infected.
So, preventing the mosquito bite from happening in the first place is becoming absolutely critical to survival.
It is the whole ballgame at this point.
But if preventing the bite is the priority, and DEET is the gold standard for preventing bites, why can't we just flood these vulnerable areas with DEET?
It comes down to basic economics and supply chains. DEET is a synthetic chemical. It has to be manufactured in massive industrial facilities and then imported.
Right.
For a rural Ugandan subsistence farmer, a bottle of commercial DEET repellent is simply out of their price bracket. It might cost a significant percentage of a week's wages.
So it's a luxury good they cannot afford to use every single day.
Precisely. And that massive economic barrier is exactly the problem Dr. Simon Schofield and his research team set out to solve. They needed a highly efficacious repellent that could be produced entirely locally, independent of global supply chains, for pennies.
Which brings in the community aspect of the sources we looked at. The team developed something called DSK lotion, right?
Yes. DSK stands for Deason Stephen Kalobo, who was a deeply respected local community leader in the region. The project to create this lotion was spearheaded by an organization called CM Pop Po.
That's the community enterprise model for plant oil production, correct?
That's the one. Their philosophy was brilliant. They realized that just handing out free imported repellent relies on endless charity.
Which isn't sustainable.
Exactly. Instead, they wanted to build a self-sustaining microeconomy. Catnip is incredibly robust. It grows easily in rural Ugandan soil. So the model empowers local farmers to cultivate the plant on their own land.
That's amazing.
Local workers are trained to extract the essential oil using basic equipment. And then the community formulates and bottles the DSK lotion themselves.
I mean, you are basically describing open source medicine. You bypass the massive factories and just hand the blueprint directly to the community so they own the entire means of production.
That's exactly what it is.
But I have to wonder about the sheer math of this. Can a grassroots, community-run agricultural project actually scale up enough to make a dent in a disease that infects nearly 300 million people a year? It sounds almost too localized to fight a global crisis.
It is the pivotal question for the researchers. Currently, the DSK lotion has been distributed for free through external grant funding, primarily to test its real-world efficacy in human landing catch assays and to get the community engaged.
Okay, so testing the waters.
Right. The next phase, according to Dr. Schofield, is transitioning this into a true self-sustaining commercial system. They plan to upscale production and sell the lotion in local markets for a very small, highly affordable price.
And the money stays local.
Yes, the revenue from those sales then flows directly back to the local farmers who grew the plant, the extractors, and the distributors. Will this one project solve the entire global malaria crisis on its own? No, it won't. But scaling it district by district empowers communities to aggressively protect themselves today without having to wait for expensive imported chemicals to arrive on charity trucks.
Okay, but if this plant grows like a weed, costs almost nothing to produce, and legitimately matches the effectiveness of the most widely used synthetic chemical repellent on Earth,
I know where you're going with this.
why isn't a pharmaceutical giant mass-producing this? I mean, if this works so well, why isn't Nepetalactone sitting on every single pharmacy shelf in the world right now?
It's a great question, and the answer reveals a lot about how global medicine actually functions. It comes down to the mechanics of the pharmaceutical industry and intellectual property law.
Because it's a plant?
Yes, nepetalactone is a naturally occurring biological compound. Under current legal frameworks, you cannot easily patent the chemical that a plant naturally produces in the wild.
And the pharmaceutical companies need a patent.
The reality is, the pharmaceutical and chemical industries run entirely on patents. Without the ability to hold an exclusive patent, a massive corporation simply doesn't have the financial incentive to invest the tens of millions of dollars required to commercialize, package, heavily market, and globally distribute a product.
Wow.
If they can't establish a monopoly to protect their initial investment, they just won't build the infrastructure.
So literally, because nature invented the solution first, the traditional corporate apparatus just ignored it. There's no profit margin in a weed anyone can grow. That is wildly frustrating, but I guess it also perfectly highlights why the Ugandan community-driven model is so necessary.
Absolutely.
They don't need a patent. They just need to not get bitten by mosquitoes.
Exactly. They are bypassing the need for a corporate monopoly entirely. However, we do have to look at the scientific limitations of this approach, because calling something natural does not automatically mean it is flawless.
Right. There's always a catch.
There is a catch to using catnip, and it was heavily emphasized by Swaikaiba. He's a research entomologist from the Ifakara Health Institute in Tanzania who reviewed this approach.
And what did he find?
He pointed out that the major challenge with plant-based topical repellents isn't their initial effectiveness, it's user compliance.
Compliance meaning like getting people to actually remember to put it on.
Yes, and having the motivation to continually reapply it. Plant essential oils, including catnip oil, are highly volatile compounds. In chemistry, volatile just means they evaporate into the air relatively quickly at room temperature.
Okay.
While the 6% DSK lotion is highly effective when applied, the studies show that formulations, specifically the 2% formulation, protect for about 1 to 4 hours before they evaporate away.
Only 1 to 4 hours.
Yeah. DEET, on the other hand, depending on the concentration, is designed to stick around. It can last sometimes up to 8 hours or more.
Ah, okay. So if I'm a farmer in Uganda and I put this lotion on at 8 p.m., the invisible tear gas evaporates and wears off by midnight. If I have to set an alarm to wake up every 4 hours in the middle of the night just to reapply this lotion, doesn't that make it completely impractical for actually preventing nighttime malaria transmissions? I mean, nobody is going to do that.
It would be incredibly impractical if this lotion were meant to replace mosquito nets, but it's not.
Oh, I see.
Swaikiba emphasized that repellents like DSK lotion are a complementary tool. The primary defense against nighttime biting when you are asleep is still sleeping under a physical, insecticide-treated bed net.
Okay, so where does the lotion fit in?
Where this catnip lotion becomes a massive game changer is for the hours before people go to bed. In many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, mosquito species are highly active in the early evening. We're talking about those crucial hours when people are cooking, doing chores, or socializing outdoors.
That makes total sense.
A repellent that provides 3 or 4 hours of solid, unbreachable protection is perfectly suited to cover that exact window of vulnerability.
You use the cheap local lotion for the evening shift to get you through dinner, and you use the bed net for the night shift while you sleep. It's a layered defense system.
Precisely. And because the lotion is so inexpensive to produce locally, applying it every evening becomes a sustainable daily habit, rather than an ongoing financial burden that families have to stress about.
So if rural Ugandan communities can harness this incredible chemistry just by growing a weed in the dirt, that begs the question, can I just grow this in my backyard and make it myself?
You really can.
Because catnip is famously easy to grow pretty much anywhere. In fact, if you plant it in a typical garden, you usually have to fight to keep it from taking over all your other plants.
Oh yeah, it spreads like crazy.
How can the person listening to this right now take this cutting-edge global health science and apply it in their own kitchen?
Well, our sources included a highly practical breakdown from House Digest on how to execute this DIY extraction at home, and it is surprisingly accessible.
I'm taking note.
You do not need a high-tech chemistry lab or complex distillation equipment. The very first step is simply harvesting the catnip leaves and stems from your garden. You want to chop or dice them up as finely as you possibly can.
Okay, why so finely?
The goal here is to physically break down the plant cell walls and expose as much surface area of the plant matter as possible.
Okay, so I am standing in my kitchen with a cutting board covered in a pile of finely chopped up catnip. What is the next step to extract the nepetalactone?
You take that diced plant material, place it into an oven-safe container like a glass mason jar, and completely submerge it in a carrier oil.
Any specific kind of oil?
You have options here. You can use standard soy oil, olive oil, avocado oil, or even melted coconut oil. Once the plant matter is fully submerged, you place the container in the oven and bake it for 2 to 3 hours at a very low heat, specifically about 200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wait, why the oven? Why wouldn't I just dump it in a pot and boil it on the stovetop to extract it faster?
Because of what we discussed earlier regarding volatility, nepetalactone is a delicate, volatile compound.
Ah, right.
If you boil it on a stovetop at high heat, you will literally destroy the active compounds or evaporate them right out of the oil and into your kitchen air.
You just lose all the bug spray into the exhaust fan.
Exactly. Using the oven at a low, controlled 200 degrees gently coaxes the nepetalactone out of the plant matter and infuses it directly into the carrier oil without destroying it.
Very clever.
After 2 or 3 hours of the slow bake, you take it out, let it cool down, and then pour it through a strainer to remove the crunchy plant bits. What you are left with in the bowl is your concentrated, homemade catnip essential oil.
But we established earlier that we cannot just slather that straight concentrated oil onto our arms, right? Because of skin irritation and the fact that 6% is a scientific sweet spot.
Correct. To replicate the scientifically backed 6% efficacy ratio that matched DET in those Ugandan field trials, you need to dilute your homemade essential oil into a regular lotion.
And what's the math on that?
The math works out to a ratio of 3 parts catnip oil to 50 parts of a standard unscented body lotion.
3 to 50. Let's make that a bit more manageable for someone standing in their kitchen with measuring spoons.
In standard kitchen measurements, that translates to roughly 3 teaspoons of your homemade catnip oil mixed thoroughly into just over 1 cup of standard lotion.
3 teaspoons of oil stirred into 1 cup of lotion. That is incredibly doable.
It really is.
But let me ask you about the real-world application of this. A lot of parents are naturally wary of covering their kids in synthetic chemicals all summer. DET, for example, is heavily regulated. It's generally not recommended for infants under 6 months old, and pregnant women are often advised by doctors to use it with caution.
That's true.
Does this DIY catnip recipe actually give families a safer, scientifically backed alternative for their kids at a summer barbecue?
Based on the established safety profile of Nepetalactone, which, remember, has been safely consumed in teas and folk remedies for centuries, and is approved for human topical use by environmental protection agencies. Yes, it offers a highly compelling natural alternative.
That's fantastic.
It entirely avoids the synthetic chemical footprint of DT, and as the researchers noted during the Ugandan trials, users actually greatly prefer the pleasant herbal smell.
I bet they do.
However, the exact caveat we discussed with swai still applies. It is highly volatile. If you are taking your kids out to a barbecue for a long afternoon, you cannot just apply it once at noon and expect it to last until sunset.
Right. You have to reapply.
You will need to reapply it every few hours to maintain that invisible shield of TRPA1 activation.
So we have gone on quite an incredible journey today. We started with the sheer universal annoyance of a mosquito whine in the dark. We learned about nepetalactone, this brilliant natural compound that acts like invisible pepper spray on a mosquito's TRPA1 receptor while leaving humans completely unbothered.
Yeah.
We traveled to rural Uganda, where communities are taking public health into their own hands, entirely bypassing the global pharmaceutical industry to grow and extract their own DSK lotion to fight malaria.
It's inspiring work.
We looked at the sobering realities of evaporation and reapplication, and finally, we broke down a simple, low and slow baked oil recipe so you can harness this cutting-edge science in your own kitchen with just 3 teaspoons of oil and a cup of lotion.
Just a weed in an oven.
It really is a perfect example of how rigorous, peer-reviewed science can validate affordable, accessible solutions that have just been growing in the dirt this whole time.
It really is. And looking at all these sources together leaves me with one final lingering thought.
What's that?
If a common garden herb, known primarily for intoxicating our house cats, actually holds the biological key to replacing a synthetic chemical giant like DET and fighting a disease that kills hundreds of thousands of people every year, this raises an incredibly important question. What other weeds are growing right under our noses, in the cracks of the pavement, or in our backyards that possess completely untapped pharmaceutical superpowers? How many other life-saving, natural solutions have we simply ignored as a society because they can't be patented and monetized by a massive corporation?
Wow, that is definitely something to chew on the next time you are out pulling weeds in the garden. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and the next time you hear that high-pitched whine hovering near your ear, just remember your cat's favorite toy might just be your absolute best defense. We'll see you next time.